Hey guys, Jen here with Serenity Hill Farmstead. Today I'm going to talk about something that has no doubt been on thousands of families' minds for weeks now. School's getting ready to start here soon, or would be, and schools still don't really know in a lot of areas how they're going to handle going back to school in the midst of a pandemic. Every school is different, the guidelines are ever changing, and it is really difficult to make a long-term decision based on ever-changing short-term information. Regardless of where you're located, you likely have one of three options: doing the face-to-face, putting them back in schools, and wearing masks, and having to be restricted to just one classroom, taking away things like music, PE, cafeteria time, recess time, not being able to get any kind of social interaction with their peers. It's definitely not an ideal situation. So you've got face-to-face education, distance learning, or completely withdrawing from the school district altogether, and homeschooling. Now, I've never sent my children to school, to public school, during a pandemic. And I've never had them do distance learning. I've done it myself during college, but that is a very different thing as an adult. What I do know about is homeschooling. We are going into our 10th year of homeschooling, and we did actually start our homeschooling journey by pulling our oldest son out of the public school district. There's a lot of videos right now, a lot of great channels putting out a lot of really great content about how to choose curriculum and how to get started homeschooling when you're used to a public school setting. But I want to back it up a little bit in this video and talk about making that decision. There's a lot of you, I'm sure, have already settled on your decision. Maybe you've even bought in your curriculum, decided to homeschool, and you've gotten started. But there are still a lot of districts out there that haven't solidified their plans, or maybe they're not starting until well after Labor Day. This video is going to be for those that still are not 100% sure on what they're going to do. I want to talk to you about some things to consider before you make that decision. I'm also going to share a little bit about our experience switching from public schooling into homeschooling, and some things I really wish that I knew before our first year of homeschooling started. The very first thing that I encourage you to answer for yourself if you are considering homeschooling is asking yourself why you're homeschooling. And this is not just a pandemic question. This is a question that homeschoolers, veteran homeschoolers, are encouraged to answer for themselves at time of burnout, or just really at the beginning of every year. It helps get you geared up, ready for your school year, reminding yourself why you are doing this. Homeschooling is not an easy road, but it's definitely worth it if you have clear reasons as to why you want to do it. Typically, you'll hear things like to be closer as a family, to teach based on a certain religion, to provide an education based on a certain way of life, morals, values, or they simply just don't care for the public school district and they want to provide their children with a different kind of education. For the sake of having a solid example for the video, ours is, yes, I write it down, to raise up our children in the way of the Lord, to keep the family unit a sacred thing, and to teach them homesteading sustainability skill sets. And also, we have special needs children. If you've been following for any length of time, you know this. But our school district, local to us, our school district was not equipped to be able to give them the kind of education that we wanted them to have. But maybe your why is not quite so elaborate. Maybe your why is simply to not get COVID, to not wear masks for 4+ hours a day. And those whys are okay too. Maybe you don't know your why. Maybe you're still in the middle of making your decision. Maybe you have been considering homeschooling for a while and this whole COVID mess is just giving you that last final little push into the world of homeschooling. But whatever your reason is, I want you to consider one more thing. Where do you want to be in 1 year? A year from now, do you want to be continuing your homeschooling? Do you want to be back in the school district? Do you not know? Are you on the fence and want to take it year by year? There is no wrong answer to that question, but you do have to be prepared differently depending on what your answer is. If you were planning on starting to homeschool this year with the intention of not returning to public school, you pretty much have two things. I mean, there's many other things to consider, but two main things to consider that are the most urgent that you really have to figure out soon, like very soon. Figuring out what your state laws are and how to stay compliant with them, and choosing your curriculum. If you are taking it year by year and you are not sure how long you want to be homeschooling for, you have to consider those same things. What are the state laws in your state and how do you stay compliant with them? And what curriculum are you going to use? But adding on a little bit to that curriculum thing, when you are looking at curriculums, you may want to consider choosing a curriculum that will keep them on grade level with the rest of their peers. If you want to homeschool just for this 1 year and then you want to return into the public school system next year, this is where it can get tricky. Again, state requirements are a big one. You have to make sure that you're compliant there. Choosing the curriculum is another big one, but for this, it's huge because you also need to stay at grade level, but you also want to make sure that the curriculum you're choosing is in line with the teaching style that your school district does. And math is the perfect example for that. Several school districts, I think most school districts, are choosing to follow Common Core. If you decide to pull your child out of the public school district and start homeschooling, and you switch to a curriculum and do a whole year on a new type of math, say they're switching into algebra, or if they're switching into geometry, or just learning multiplication, and that curriculum does not follow Common Core, they might really struggle if they're going back into a school district the following year that does follow Common Core. There's a lot of subjects that really doesn't pertain to, but say with the example of history or science. In the world of homeschooling, unless you are picking a boxed curriculum, science is kind of done year by year, meaning if we choose one year, hey, we're going to do anatomy, then we're going to do anatomy. If we're going to do, hey, we're going to do nature studies and plant life cycles and water life cycles and animal life cycles and food chains, then we're going to do it that year. There's nothing saying you have to do this year, this year, unless you're following a specific scope and sequence to a curriculum over many years. So if you are going to homeschool for 1 year, you may want to consider asking the school district and maybe the teachers that would be teaching that grade that they're not going to be there for, what they're going to cover in science that year and history and those kinds of subjects, so that you can teach that at home so they're not missing out on it, and when they return the next year, there isn't that hole in their learning. You also want to make sure you are crystal clear on how your public school is going to handle re-entry the next year. And I'm sure this will be different based on the grade level of your child, but I know for high school, you have to consider things like transcripts. Are they going to accept the transcript that you've put together on that year? Are they going to partially accept it? What are they going to partially accept? How do they figure that out? Is it going to be done by placement tests, or do you need an accredited curriculum? In which case, that drastically reduces your curriculum options and typically increases the price of that curriculum. If you have children that are very into extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, things like that, if your school district is still allowing those sports or groups to meet, you want to make sure you ask if they will be allowed to participate in these groups and activities. A lot of school districts around us require partial enrollment or proof of grades in order to participate in things. And in our state, for example, it's up to the individual school. It's not a region or a district. It is per the school. It is at their discretion whether or not they want to allow homeschoolers to participate in anything that their school does, with the exception of special needs things, which we'll get to in a moment, and things like driver's ed and the special needs thing. So if you have an IEP, a 504, if your child is receiving services from that school district, you're going to have to check your local laws on if the school still has to provide those for you. I know in our area they have to. They can't tell us no. They can refer us to another district if there is not enough space for them, but they can't tell us, no, you can't get services because you homeschool. In our state, that is illegal. Make sure that you're not just taking their word for it, because even though you'd really like to assume that the school district is just there to help everybody and you don't want to assume bad about them, because there's some fantastic school districts out there, there are some districts that are just not keen on helping homeschoolers. They've got their own things going on and they have a lot to worry about within their districts, and they do not want to help by getting you resources. So you definitely want to make sure that you know the laws based off of your state, what their laws are, and you can find that on HSLDA. I will put the link for HSLDA in the description box below. In there you can Google your state and find all the laws and everything that you are required to do as a homeschooler and that your school district is required to provide for you. So I have a video all about transitioning, specifically our story of transitioning from public schooling to homeschooling here, if you want to watch that after this video. So I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm going to hit the highlights just a little bit. When we pulled out of the homeschooling system, it was not well received. We got a lot of slack from a lot of different people, and when it comes to homeschooling, everyone has an opinion. You may find people are a little more supportive, a little more understanding during this time, this craziness that we're facing right now, but they may not be. What you need to remember during this time is this is your decision, your family's decision with your children. You're the ones raising them, and ultimately you're the ones responsible for their education. You may not experience any negativity at all, and that would be ideal. That would be a wonderful situation. But you need to be prepared for it just in case. And that brings me to the next point I want to talk about. Expectations and things I wish I knew. So homeschooling, it's not public schooling at home. I'm sure you've heard that from many videos and many content creators across all of YouTube land. But it's true. Homeschooling is not cramming 6+ hours of school and every single subject into every single day. I mean, it could be. You do you. But personally, I don't know any homeschoolers that do that at all. A little backstory. When we first started homeschooling, I bought a box curriculum, Life Pack. And great curriculum. Not saying anything bad about it, but it was not for us. We sat at a desk every single day, multiple hours every day for a good long while. There was minimum interaction between me and my then second grader. A lot of tears were shed by both of us, and I kind of justified it by saying I have 2 babies also, and I'm homeschooling, and I can't be everywhere at the same time, which is true. But I justified it with that. So I just told myself I can't do everything at once, and I have to be okay with that. And I listened to the voices that were much louder than my own at that time. And a lot of those voices told me that he just needs to learn to do things on his own, that he needs to learn to be more independent, that he just wants more attention from me. I am, after all, his mom, and I pulled him away from all his teachers. He doesn't know how to learn like that. It's just a hard transition. I mean, I could go on. I heard it all. But no, wrong. All of it, wrong. I wasn't homeschooling because that's not homeschooling. Again, could be for you. If that's you, that works for you, great, you do you. But what I was doing was forcing public school-like education and independent study on a second grader. And I was forcing him to do it all at home, alone. I mean, he wasn't alone, but he was alone, you know? So one day I stopped. It was a particularly bad day. I stopped, I grabbed his curriculum away from him, and he was just looking at me like, oh, what happened? What'd I do? And I said, what do you want to learn? And that changed our entire experience. He said, the Mississippi River. Done. You got it. Let's do it. We spent the rest of that year learning water cycles and life cycles and food chains and trade routes, the building of the river towns and their purpose. We learned about heritage towns and Mark Twain. Let's see, what else did we do? Different ecosystems and various parts of the rivers, locks and dams. We lived 10 minutes from the Mississippi River, and we had ample opportunity for nature studies and nature walks and lots of observation and nature journaling. And we went and visited river museums. We read all of the books in the library on all of those subjects. And the babies were happier, and my son was happier, and I was happier. And we really started to love learning. And that year built our homeschool. Okay, story time over before it gets emotional. All of that to say, my expectations my first year of homeschooling were way off. I didn't know what I was doing or what I wanted to do. I didn't know about resources in my area. I didn't know about co-ops. I really didn't even know what I wanted my homeschool to look like. I didn't know there were options. But figuring out what you want your homeschool to look like takes time and a lot of trial and error. That's what would have helped me the most if I would have heard it. Don't compare yourself or your homeschool to the public school, what anybody else is really doing, any other homeschooling family that you may know, and don't try and replicate public school at home. You're not a public school, you're a homeschool. And it takes a while to find your groove. All right, so these are some really weird times that we're living in right now, and making impossible decisions seems to be a regularly occurring thing. Education, work, general life just seems to be a pretty consistent thing these days. Whatever your education decision is for your children, know that you are not alone. And I'm willing to bet that whatever your situation is, no matter how unique you think it is, I can almost guarantee that if you do a little searching on YouTube, you'll find somebody else in almost the exact same situation with some really good advice. If you are a new homeschooler or you are on the fence and you're just pretty sure, but not sure, but maybe, I don't know, possibly going to be homeschooling this year. I want to invite you guys to subscribe. I have a lot of really good new homeschooler content coming for the month of August. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can get notified when those videos come out this month. So hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.